On our newscast tonight, still no response from Pyongyang on South Korea's proposal for high-level talks, but the regime does issue a fresh threat. And in Busan, the venue for the ITU conference, IT and mobile experts from around the world are putting their heads together to discuss the future of mobile communications technology. Leaders of Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement sit down for talks with government officials this evening, but there's very little optimism about an agreement being reached. Stay with us for these stories and more. It's 6 p.m. Tuesday, October 21st here in Korea, live from Seoul. I'm Daniel Choy.
And I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. Thanks for joining us on Early Edition at 6. Now, October 30th is fast approaching, but North Korea remains silent on whether it will participate in high-level inter-Korean talks offered by South Korea.
Instead, it says it will have no choice but to retaliate if South Korea keeps on provoking the regime. Our Kwon Soa starts us off.
Still no word from Pyongyang. While South Korea awaited a response to its proposal to hold high-level political talks next Thursday, North Korean soldiers were busy patrolling along the Military Demarcation Line near the South Korean border city of Paju. That's what the North said it would be doing on Monday when it warned of retaliation if Seoul continued with what it called provocations. North Korea was referring to an incident on Sunday when the two Koreas traded fire after 10 North Korean soldiers were seen approaching the inter-Korean border. Heightened military tensions have cast a dark cloud over prospects that high-level talks will go ahead as planned. The North state-run Korean Central News Agency said Tuesday that inter-Korean relations are at a critical crossroads, adding that if South Korea wants to hold the talks, it should first create an atmosphere for improving relations. Experts believe North Korea's hostile behavior that follows a recent visit by a high-level North Korean delegation is a calculated move, and that the regime wants to put itself in a better position for talks.
There is a high chance that North Korea will respond to South Korea's proposal for a second round of high-level talks after watching how the Park administration deals with the South Korean activists that plan to send anti-propaganda leaflets later this week.
Sunday's shootout came a little over a week after North Korea fired at balloons carrying the leaflets. If talks resume, Pyongyang is expected to ask the South to lift sanctions, provide economic support, and take steps to stop South Korean activists from flying anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the border. Kwon Soa, Arirang News.
Details about a meeting between President Park Geun-hye and former top Chinese diplomat Tang Jiashan have not been made official, but North Korean affairs are likely to have topped their agenda. The president held talks on Tuesday with the former state councilor who's on a 5-day trip to Seoul. This is not the first time she has met with Tang. President Park held talks with him on several occasions before becoming president to discuss issues mainly related to Pyongyang's nuclear program. Tang dealt with Korea-China affairs while serving in top posts for China's foreign ministry until the year 2008. And what we do know coming out of the meeting I just mentioned is that President Park will meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the APEC summit in Beijing next month. That was confirmed during her talks with Tang Jiashan on Tuesday. He said Chinese President Xi Jinping was looking forward to seeing President Park at next month's summit, adding that President Park is highly revered in China, not just as a head of state, but also as a distinguished guest. President Park responded by thanking Tang for his deep interest in Korea-China relations, even after retiring as a diplomat.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se and Defense Minister Han Min-gu will head to the United States on Wednesday to attend a bilateral foreign and defense ministers meeting. Seoul's foreign ministry says the so-called 2+2 talks will be held in Washington on Thursday, local time. With U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel in attendance, the two sides are expected to cover a range of issues, including North Korea's nuclear program and measures to strengthen the South Korea-U.S. alliance. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's national security advisor touched down in Seoul this Tuesday for talks with South Korean officials. During his meeting with Korean National Security Advisor Kim Kwon-jin, the two discussed matters of mutual interest and bilateral relations. In order for the two countries to move forward, Kim emphasized the need for Japan to resolve the issue of Korean women forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military during World War II. The two officials spoke of the importance of normalizing diplomatic relations between the two countries and cooperating in dealing with North Korea's provocations. Representatives from Korea's ruling and opposition parties met this Tuesday for discussions on 3 bills related to April's ferry disaster. Saenuri Party floor leader Lee Won-gu met with his New Politics Alliance for Democracy counterpart Woo Yoon-gun, and the two discussed the details of a pending Seoul ferry bill, emphasizing that it should be passed by the end of this month. In an attempt to prevent accidents like April's ferry sinking from happening again, the 3 bills aim to end corruption between companies and government officials. The two parties also launched a special task force that is working on the bills, which they aim to pass at an upcoming parliamentary session next Friday.
Face a one-day entry ban. 77.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Laah Hyun-kyung and Daniel Choy.
Arirang News. Arirang News.
On Early Edition at 6.
The 2014 International Telecommunication Union Conference, often dubbed the Olympics of the ICT industry, is very much underway in Korea's largest port city of Busan. There, IT and mobile experts are discussing ways to make the next generation of mobile communications technology a reality. Song Ji-sun reports from Busan.
In a little over 5 years' time, when 5G technologies are fully commercialized, people will be able to download a high-definition movie in less than 1 second. The 5th generation of mobile communications technology is several hundred times faster than its predecessor LTE, as the giga-level data rate is now a reality.
In the early years of 2020, will feature approximately 6 gigabits per second peak data rate and may eventually reach up to tens of gigabits per second. However, what is more important than the peak data rate, we think, is the minimum data rate experienced by the users.
That threshold will be maintaining a minimum data rate of 1 gigabit per second. But Samsung recently succeeded in establishing a 1.2 gigabit per second data rate on a vehicle that was traveling at 100 kilometers an hour. So we're inching closer to realizing the next generation of mobile technology, something that will connect all individuals and things, also known as Internet of Things.
When 5G technologies launch in 2020, everyone will be connected. Every object will be connected to each other, and objects and individuals will be connected. It will be an ultra-connected world, which will mark the beginning of an entirely different paradigm for ICTs.
The Korean government aims to test its 5G technologies at the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games. Seoul says the sporting event will be a global testbed for the technology we can expect to see in the post-2020 era. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News, Busan.
Apple has announced the record figures for its fiscal fourth quarter, which ended on September 27th. The better-than-expected revenue is said to have been driven by its signature iPhone and iMac computers. Kim Hyun-bin has this report.
Apple's fourth quarter earnings have smashed expectations on the back of strong iPhone sales. The company posted $42.1 billion in sales and a net profit of $8.5 billion. Apple sold 39.3 million iPhones in the quarter, the first that the new iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus were on sale. That's well above what analysts were expecting and 16% higher than the same period last year. Apple's $1.42 per share profit also exceeded analysts' prediction of $1.31 per share. Apple sold a record 5.5 million iMac computers, up more than 20% from the same quarter in 2013. The only black mark in an otherwise glowing report was its flagging iPad line. iPad sales were down 13% from the previous year, for a third successive quarter of decline. Sales of the iPhone, on the other hand, have steadily increased, even though smartphone sales have declined in developed markets, such as the US and Europe. The larger screen iPhone 6 and 6 Plus got a strong reaction early on, with the company selling 10 million smartphones in the opening week, up 1 million from last year. Apple is expected to see a big jump in sales in the near future, as it teamed up with China Mobile last year, the largest carrier in the world, gaining access to around 800 million more subscribers. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Pro-democracy protest leaders and Hong Kong government officials are scheduled to hold official talks this evening. Ahead of the televised dialogue, the region's High Court granted injunctions to disperse protesters in parts of the city, which Hong Kong police said is a dangerous juncture. Here's our Kim Min-ji with more.
Hong Kong police say the prospect for further clashes is growing in the Mong Kok district as pro-democracy protesters refuse to heed court injunctions to clear parts of the city.
The situation in Mong Kok is spinning out of control and on the verge of turning into a riot. I appeal to the protesters in the unlawful assembly, especially to students, for the sake of your personal safety and public order, stay away from the dangerous areas in Mong Kok.
The temporary orders by the territory's High Court affects roads in the districts of Mong Kok and Admiralty. The injunctions were granted Monday to local taxi associations, a bus company, and later to an investment company. All argued the demonstrations had lasted too long and were proving to be a public nuisance. Student leaders left it up to the individual to decide whether to stay or leave. Although crowds have thinned, tensions soared over the weekend after Hong Kong's Beijing-backed leader CY Leung accused the movement of containing, quote, external forces. Meanwhile, long-awaited televised talks between student leaders and government officials are set to begin at 6 p.m. local time Tuesday. However, expectations are low for a breakthrough. Earlier, Leung told foreign media that universal suffrage was unacceptable, in part because it risked populism driven by the voices of the poor and the working class. The embattled leader also warned protesters not to test China's patience, adding that Hong Kong was lucky that Beijing had not yet intervened in the standoff. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Nigeria has been declared Ebola-free by the World Health Organization. Unfortunately, its fellow West African nations are still struggling to stop the spread of the deadly virus. Over in the U.S., though, dozens of people on the watch list have been cleared of infection. Our Connie Lee has the details.
Key supplies have been sent to West Africa in the fight against Ebola. Ghana's President John Mahama told the BBC that fresh resources have begun to arrive in Guinea, Sierra Leone and Liberia, the three worst-hit West African countries. According to Mahama, the list of resources includes emergency food from the UN's World Food Program and more protective clothing. Supplies such as body bags, goggles and face masks have been in short supply in these countries. This comes as the World Health Organization declared that Nigeria is one more country that is now officially Ebola-free.
Nigeria is now free of Ebola virus transmission.
Just last week, Senegal also declared it was free of the virus.
This is a spectacular success story that shows to the world that Ebola can be contained. But we must be clear that we only won a battle. The war will only end when West Africa is also declared free of Ebola.
In other hopeful news, 43 people in the U.S. who came into contact with Ebola victim Thomas Duncan have now been officially cleared of the virus after not demonstrating any symptoms during a 21-day monitoring period. In Spain, a nurse who had contracted Ebola is also free of the virus. But apart from the good news, more than 4,500 people have already died from Ebola, and the virus is still rampant in parts of West Africa. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
And Korea, of course, is eager to lend a helping hand in the fight against Ebola. The first group of Korean medics will be flying to West Africa sometime in November. The government says an advanced team of medics will be dispatched to 2 West African nations, most likely Liberia and Sierra Leone. The group will review safety plans for dispatching future medical teams, which will be recruited via the internet. About 10 people will be selected based on their expertise, and they are expected to spend about 2 to 3 months there. The decision is sparking quite a controversy in the country, though, with opposition parties and some in the medical community expressing concerns that Korea is not fully prepared in treating Ebola.
And now turning to the Middle East, where fierce fighting has reignited north of Kobani. That's where a month-long battle for control between Kurdish forces and Islamic State fighters has been ongoing. Loud explosions, small arms fire, and coalition airstrikes were reportedly heard as night fell on Monday. In an unprecedented move, the Turkish government announced that it would grant a safe passage to the Iraqi Kurds on its side of the border to join the fight in Syria. The development comes amid the U.S.-led coalition fight against Islamic State militants in Syria and Iraq. And speaking of the U.S., Washington is under fire after a report found that the U.S. government had paid out millions of dollars in Social Security to dozens of suspected Nazi war criminals forced out of the country. A senior House Democrat is demanding an investigation after the Associated Press reported that a legal loophole had allowed the payments funneled using taxpayer money. The U.S. Justice Department said benefits were paid to those who had first renounced their U.S. citizenship and left voluntarily.
Shifting gears to a different story now, there's a technology that a tiny Korean company was recently able to develop, and the world's leading space agency apparently wants to take it off their hands. Our Shin Se-min has this story.
A small company of 3 has the technology that NASA wants. Kwang Technomagnet, based in Gyeonggi-do Province, has recently completed work on the world's first permanent magnet controlling technique. The technique creates a strong magnet that draws objects weighing dozens of tons within just 0.3 seconds using only 10 amps.
This is an original green technology that will help fuse dozens of tons of objects without the help of a current in less than a second.
The company has already acquired 13 patents for the technique, and a global patent is pending. By adopting the technique, NASA thinks its astronauts will no longer have to dock a spacecraft manually, but will be able to do it automatically. The technique is also expected to solve the issue of bolt damage, with magnetic force diminishing the risk of explosion, and the Korean firm and NASA will soon conduct a verification test. The company was able to export the technique thanks to support from Gyeonggi-do Province through a program of the University of Texas.
We educate domestic companies in collaboration with companies outside of Korea and eventually help the domestic companies enter the global market.
15 domestic SMEs have been selected for the program sponsored by Gyeonggi-do Province and the University of Texas, which has a budget of $1.4 million. The program has supported 81 companies over the past 6 years, generating over $41 million. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Having a cup of joe after meal comes naturally for many Koreans, with many willing to even pay big bucks for premium quality coffee. So it may come as no surprise that the nation's coffee imports are forecast to hit a record high this year. Data released by the Korea Customs Service shows Korea's inbound shipments of coffee during the first 9 months of the year amounted to 99,000 tons. That's up 19% from a year earlier. That figure already surpassed the previous record for annual coffee imports set back in 2011. Most coffee was imported from Vietnam, followed by Brazil, Colombia, and Honduras. Analysts say the growth is being driven by stronger consumer demand and a sharp increase in the number of coffee shops nationwide.
And now on to a story that's only going to help us if we listen carefully. The World Health Organization has released a list of guidelines that can help prevent a lot of cancer-related deaths.
Right. Thus, as the agency warned, the number of cancer cases is growing at an alarming rate globally, and that urgent action is needed to prevent a crisis. Our Connie Kim has this report.
The World Health Organization has rolled out a dozen health tips to help reduce the risk of cancer by half. Experts at the WHO's International Agency for Research on Cancer say the recommendations allow people to change their behavior on an individual level. At the top of the list, do not smoke, do not use any form of tobacco, have a smoke-free home and workplace. Smoking is a main culprit that kills 6 million people annually and an additional 600,000 from secondhand smoke. The harmful habit is also blamed as the biggest cause of premature death from chronic conditions such as heart disease, stroke, and high blood pressure. New tips on the list urge people to look for potential exposure to radiation at home and to actively reduce high radon levels. Bowel, breast, and cervical cancer screening tests were also suggested. For females in particular, it recommended breastfeeding, limiting the use of hormone replacement therapy, and HPV vaccinations for girls. The 12-point code also stressed the importance of avoiding alcohol, excessive sun exposure, and maintaining a healthy diet. The WHO's Specialized Cancer Agency says it hopes the new code will help individuals to take concrete action for themselves, friends and family in order to significantly cut down the risks of developing cancer. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And now for the latest weather updates, we turn to our Michelle Park.
Michelle, it's currently drizzling outside here in Seoul. Are things going to clear up for tomorrow?
Well, we're seeing the last bit of the rain we're in the capital area, but it's still raining heavily in the regions below the central region, and those areas may see between 20 and 30 millimeters fall per hour this evening. Now, we are expecting about 100 millimeters or more with thunderstorms in the Chungcheondo and Gyeongsangbuk-do provinces, while up to 30 to 80 is expected in the southern regions. Now, looking at the water surrounding the peninsula, strong wind and wave advisories have been issued in both eastern and western coastal areas, and waves could peak up at 40 meters high. Now, going over to our temperature readings for tomorrow. Seoul will start off the Wednesday morning at 10 before reaching up to 18 degrees in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will reach up to 17 and 18 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island peaks to 18 as well, while Dokdo drops down to 14, while Mount Kumgang will be chilly at 13 degrees. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and now here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's a wrap from us for now. Thank you for watching. This has been Laah Hyun-kyung.
And I'm Daniel Choy. To our viewers in Korea, have a great rest of the evening. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow.